All right, thank you all for coming. Welcome to the February 28th meeting of the PFAS Work Group. As we do roll call around the room, I'm just going to ask everybody who is on the committee to say your name and tell us just very briefly what you do in the community so that we can stay in touch with each other. And we'll start right over here.
Tim Southern, I'm the District 3 Manager for Henderson County.
Kevin Roberts, Director of Operations for Henderson Water Utility.
Tom Williams, I'm the General Manager of the Water Utility. I'm Mike Costello, Director of Manufacturing for Shamrock.
Whitney Grizzly, Henderson Economic Development. Missy Vanderpool, Henderson Economic Development.
I'm Craig Pritchett, Henderson County River Board.
Don Stillett, City of Henderson.
I'm Clay Horton, I'm the Director of the Great River District Health Department.
Chad Phillips, Henderson Community College.
Eric Gardner, Pittsburgh Tank and Tower, and here on behalf of Chamber of Commerce, Government Affairs.
Delva Dowdy, Chemistry Teacher at Henderson County Hospital.
All right, and I'm Brad Staten. I'm one of our City Commissioners. And thank you all again for taking your time to come out this afternoon. As you all know, this group was created so that we could stay a little bit closer to the PFAS situation that we've had in our community for several months now, as far as the extent of it, what's being done to mitigate it, and how we're going to move forward from there, and also to try to improve communication. And so if you have any questions or comments at the end of the presentation today, please feel free to ask those or say those at that time. I'm going to move straight into the agenda. The reason we're having a meeting today, by the way, is because last meeting I promised that we would have one in February. We don't have as much to report now as I would like, and so our agenda is going to be fairly light, but I thought it was important to touch base and to just stay connected. And so our only agenda item for today is going to be Mike Costello. Mike has put together a presentation for us today, and Mike, you just want to get straight into it, sir?
I can do that.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. Since we did an introduction, I'll introduce myself again. But let me just start off with, I am a fellow Henderson resident. I moved here 4.5 years ago. I worked for Shamrock for 4.5 years, so those two coincide. I moved here for Shamrock. We fully understand the concern for the health and safety of our community in regards to this subject. I'm sure there's any questions, and as we go through the presentation, there'll be a question and answer at the end that we can try to address your questions. So I just want to say that on behalf of Shamrock, we are fully committed to protecting the health and safety of our community and our employees. It's always been one of our top priorities. As Commissioner Hatton and the KDP have reported in their findings, there are currently no undue risks to human health from PFAS contamination. All test results show that the water supply, municipal water supply and private drinking wells are well within the current EPA limits. As Director of Manufacturing and a Henderson resident, this is critically important assurance to be able to make the incident. So this situation is complex. We take it very seriously and fully well appreciate that this will be a long road ahead, in which we are fully geared up to do. So let me say, though, that from the start, we have been fully open, honest, and cooperative with KDP, and we will follow their guidance and the measures to continue to do so, keeping this working group and the community informed every step of the way. My agenda today is I want to talk a little bit about who Shamrock is, just recap some fast facts about PFAS. I think the intent of the presentation was to talk about our timeline, what we've done up to this point. Give you a little bit of looking ahead. That's a little foggy at this point, but I can talk a little bit about there, and then we'll have the questions and answers. So who is Shamrock? So I thought I'd share a little bit about who Shamrock is. Now, Shamrock's been in the press lately. A lot of that may be negative. But Shamrock's been in Henderson for about 25 years. Maybe some of you know that, maybe some of you don't. But Shamrock employs about 120 people in this area. And we believe that we're a good community citizen and contribute to the community. We're an 80-year-old company. We were started back during the war effort, World War II, by our current owner's father. Over the years, we've grown to become a global leader and innovator of micropowders in compounds, dispersions, emulsions, and specialty additives. As part of our mission, we continuously look for ways to reduce waste. We're a leading recycler and repurposer of landfillable materials in our product, becoming the first to recycle polytetrafluoroethylene, or PTFE. So what do? Our products go into a lot of everyday things, everyday businesses, processes, finished goods. For example, we have an application for greases and lubricants that are used to lubricate farm tractors to help us produce our food crops. You go into plastic medical devices, it helps them move smoothly and give them durability as they're being used in the human body. They're used in inks. Inks and coatings are about 60% of our business, although inks is shrinking because a lot is going to the electronic media, but inks and coatings, it's used to coat the ink so the harmful pigments don't rub off. In short, what we like to say is that we keep the world from wearing out. Why do we recycle? We recycle PTFE so that less new PTFE has to be produced to meet the world's needs. This has significant positive impacts on the environment. We've recycled more than 150 million pounds of PTFE and repurposed it. This has effectively kept out 1.5 million pounds of CO2 from the greenhouse gas from the environment from producing new PTFE. So just to recap some quick fast facts. So what is PFAS? So I think everyone maybe knows what PFAS is now, but let's just recap. So PFAS stands for per polyfluoroalkyl substances. There is an estimated of roughly 5,000 to 7,000 chemicals that are classified under the PFAS family. PFAS goes into many, like I said earlier, many aspects of our everyday products that we use. Used in firefighting foams, it goes into nonstick cookware. Used to make food packaging. You go to McDonald's and you open up your food package, PTFE keeps the food from sticking to the wrapper. Goes into leather products, lubricants, and other goods. So, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, are a very diverse group of human-made chemicals that have a wide range consumer industrial use products. They have unique properties that resist grease, oil, water, and heat. Makes them very useful in a lot of different applications. For this reason, beginning in the 1940s, PFAS has been used in a variety of applications, including stain and water-resistant fabrics and carpeting, cleaning products, paints, as I mentioned, firefighting foams. Even certain PFASs are authorized by the FDA to be used in cookware, food packaging, and food processing equipment. So how prevalent is PFAS? PFAS are used in so many places and so many products that the substance can be found in trace amounts throughout the environment. And an estimated 98% of people have some level of PFAS. So PFAS is not just a Henderson issue, not just a U.S. issue, but it's a global issue that needs to be addressed with both the scientific and industrial community. All right, chronology. So I'll walk you through. There's a lot of dates and times and figures. I wanted to try to be as accurate as we could on how things transpired and how we got to where we are. So if you guys have questions, we can go back and cover some of the slides. So it all started back in 2018. We did some environmental sampling. I think it was in August timeframe of 2018 on all three of our facilities. From that sampling, we got the results and we discovered that PFAS was prevalent on our facilities. So once we found that out, we immediately self-reported to KDEP. So we met with KDEP several times over December and January, initial reporting, follow-up, and then establishing working groups. So we initially disclosed on December 7th of 2018 in a meeting with KDEP that we had discovered PFAS in our environmental samples. We had discovered that we had underground storage tanks at Community Drive, which had a high concentration of PFAS from the sample that was taken in the vicinity of those tanks. Those tanks were installed in 2014. During that meeting, the cabinet considered PFAS to be pollutant or contaminant, which means regulated. And a specified approach to tackle this issue was identify the source, look at the pathway, look at the exposure. So we identified some immediate specific actions, Exposure was to drinking water, we knew that. So one of the initial things we decided to do was look at the municipal and private drinking water. We wanted to do a pathway determination and characterization. We wanted to understand how far, we wanted to know how it got out and how far it extended. So it's called characterization. We'll get into that more later. From the data you collect through characterization, then you build a conceptual site model, and your site model has all of this put together. Your source, pathways, your potential areas of exposure, and then you start addressing corrective actions. During this time, we also described initiating an agreed order with the state. It was voluntary. The agreed order, there's agreement between Shamrock and ADEP on how we're going to handle this issue within the path forward, the workflow process. So we left that meeting on the 7th. We had initially agreed to come back in January. We're approaching the holidays. We got back, and Commissioner Hatton said, you know what, this is enough significant that we need to meet sooner than January. So we actually met again on December 20th, 2018, and we had a follow-up meeting on January 10th. So during these two meetings, we decided to establish an air and a water waste work groups. The groups were composed of both cabinet personnel as well as Shamrock. We had consultants on both sides. We have an air consultant and a water consultant. So they would make up the teams. And then the teams were tasked with developing an action plan, both immediate, short-term, and then long-term action. The cabinet's key concerns were evaluation of air dispersion and offsite impacts. So I don't want to get too far off the topic, but there is another location in North Carolina that is dealing with similar issues. So the EPA the North Carolina DEP and EPA are working closely with them, but there's been a lot of lessons learned. So the cabinet, Sean Altieri at the time, was of key interest to look at the air. So he wanted to see what our air emissions and then subsequent deposition may look like. We wanted to look at the impact on drinking water, the wells and municipal drinking water. And then we also had to evaluate those tanks that are in the ground. Those are the actions that came out of those meetings. We roll into February. So the first thing we wanted to look at was the potential impacts of the wells in the drinking water. So on February 1st, the state sampled the municipal drinking plant, both the north plant and the south plant. South plant pulled its water from the Green River, came back non-detect. North plant, which pulled its water from the Ohio, came back at 5.1 parts per trillion. Full water samples from the Ohio River, background's about 5 to 7 parts per trillion. We also, on March 12th, we identified all the different wells in the area within 1 mile radius of our facilities. We looked at the active wells. KDEP reached out, the state reached out to the active well owners, and they went out and they sampled those on March 12th. So 6 active wells were sampled. From the 6 wells, analytical results from 5 of the wells were non-detect. One of the wells had a detection slightly above the method detection limit, which is very low. But it was kind of like, it was so low they really couldn't give us a reading. So basically, all 6 wells were well below the 70 parts per trillion. So we sampled municipal, we sampled the wells, everything came back well below the 70 parts per trillion EPA advisory level. In February, moving on to our key concerns, we wanted to evaluate the removal of the in-ground storage tanks. So on February 4th, as part of this whole process, Commissioner Hatton, Deputy Commissioner Altieri, and Larry Hughes, who leads up the Superfund site for the state, all visited the facility. I'm sure Larry was there. So we spent a full day, we got them familiarized with our processes, the facilities, all 3 facilities. We showed them the tanks, and from there, they directed us to do a tank closure plan. So on March 12th, 2019, we submitted a tank closure plan. The plan was approved on April 2nd. The project was completed May 8th, 2019, and the final tank closure report was submitted on June 6th. The next key concern was to start looking at air dispersion and off-site impacts. So our third immediate concern, started looking at what was being emitted from the stacks. AECOM was our air consultant. So they drew up a test protocol on March 13th. We submitted it to the state. They approved it on March 21st. There was two pieces of equipment that we wanted to test, which wasn't a standard test. One was a wall fan. So we had to actually develop a protocol for that. So we went ahead and did that. We submitted that protocol separately on May 3rd. The state approved that on May 15th. So we did stack testing or air emissions testings during the week of March 25th, April 1st, May 29th, and May 31st of 2019. The initial test report was submitted to KDEP on June 28th of 2019. The final test report was submitted August 16th of 2019. The report was reviewed and approved by KDEP. But from the stack testing, we know now that it's coming out of the stacks. So as part of the next step was we wanted to see, because everyone's aware of physics, what goes up usually comes back down. So everything you emit lands somewhere. So we do that with air deposition modeling. So it's a program that consultants use, and they plug in all the parameters, what's going out, atmospheric conditions, the winds, the rains, all this stuff, the building characteristics, et cetera, and then they figure out where the stuff is landing. We do that as part of our air permit for HF testing, so we're familiar with it, and we use that kind of give us an idea of what we thought, and it was pretty close. So the deposition for the PFAS is very close to what we see for HF. So for that, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but as far as the deposition, we submitted the deposition protocol on April 26th of 2019. June 10th, KDEP approved it. We approved it with some comments. They wanted some changes. We accepted the changes. We went ahead and did the model and submitted the model on September 10th of 2019. So now gives us an idea of where we want to sample when we get to the offsite. During this time, so that's the air side. Now we'll walk back to the water side. So 2019 was a very busy year. A lot of immediate actions, a lot of actions taking place. So while we're working on the air side, we also started working on the water side. So we did the on-site characterization. So as part of our pathway determination, we need to figure out how much contamination was on-site, initial step. So we tested all three facilities. We had ERM, who's our water consultant, put together a plan, and on May 26th of 2019, we submitted that to the state for review. Scope of the plan is up there. What was the objectives? We wanted to get a better idea of what the analytical and other data from each of the three Shamrock sites. We want to understand what the PFAS compounds impact on environmental media, specifically to the soil, groundwater, and surface water. May 24th of 2019, KDEP approved the on-site plan. On June 17th of 2019, mobilization commenced. September 25th of 2019, Shamrock representatives met. We actually met with KDEP to present the results. And then October 4th, we submitted the plan, and the plan was approved. Once we did now we moved to off-site. So on-site was easy because we own all the properties. We don't have to get anyone's permission. Once you go off-site, you have to get permission. So a little bit longer and involved process. This is where the air deposition modeling comes in. So ERN can take AECOM's air deposition model and start laying out a grid of where we believe we should sample to get the best representation, at least understanding of potential contamination. So we put that plan together. We submitted. One step back. Also in November, the agreed order was approved on November 1st of 2019. So that was approved and put into the record. On November 5th of 2019, we submitted the off-site plan. December 12th of 2019, the off-site plan was approved. And in April of 2020, we started with access agreements. So we have we had to get, I mean, some of you guys are familiar with that, our access agreements, because you may have gotten one, but you have to get access agreements to get access to the property, so it takes a while. So we had to gen up the forms, send them all out, get them back, chase people down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty involved process, but in the middle of that, COVID hit. So we were rolling good in 19, and then we got to 20 and COVID hit, and that slowed things down quite a bit. As an example, we sent, I don't even remember who it was, but I remember the conversation, sent an access agreement to an industry. We sent everything out certified mail to everyone. And the ones we didn't get responses back from, at least the green cards, we started calling after a certain period of time. No answer, no answer. I mean, this is a company, no answer. So finally, 6 weeks after, they called us back and said, oh, we've been working from home. No one's been checking the mail. I'm like, okay, that explains it. So, I mean, these are some of the challenges that we witnessed and went through. So we got through all that. COVID probably slowed us down about 6 months, to tell you the truth. We submitted the plan's approved August 10th. We mobilized. We met with the state virtually on December 15th of 2020 to present the results. On December 18th of 2020, the off-site report was approved. On December 18th, it was submitted. On April 20th of 2021, it was approved. And in that approval letter from the state, they asked us to do some additional sampling to the north of our facilities in the direction of the Ohio River. So as we go back to what we talked about, initial exposure is through drinking water. So there were some data gaps to the north, so they wanted us to go back and fill those data gaps in to get an understanding of if in any potential contamination moving towards the Ohio River. So we have done that. So that we are calling off site characterization work phase 2. So that started in April of last year now. So we put that plan together. We submitted the plan August 23rd, this very same scope. September 20th of 2021, KDEP approved the offsite. November 2021, access agreements were sent to landowners. And we began offsite work on February 14th of 2022, it just started 2 weeks ago. We're in the process still sampling out towards the river, as the river corridors are, because we're on their property, and several other properties out towards the river. This should finish up. The rain last week really slowed it down again, so we'll probably finish up another week and a half. Going forward from here, the plan is to submit the report in June of this year for the offsite phase 2. Assuming that is approved and that is the last of the characterization work, then the next step will be to put a conceptual site model together, which will look at everything, your sources, your pathways, your contamination levels, and then your potential exposures. And then you put your corrective action plan together. Control equipment on the stacks, remediation, whatever that may be, and then that all goes to KDEP. So that's kind of the steps going forward. When and how, when that occurs, a lot of the challenges we have is there's no regulations on it right now. EPA is working on some, but they're focusing on water. There's nothing on there. No one's even. The EPA has a roadmap out, but it's all geared towards water. There's nothing geared towards air or anything like that. So we're kind of operating in uncharted territory, I guess you want to if you're a sailor. So we'll be working closely with KDEP, taking direction from them as we have been. So in closing, just to reiterate a few points. So Shamrock Technologies is a company with a proud heritage that's allowed us to become a global leader, an innovator in micropowders. These have many beneficial uses, products in life-saving medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and myriad of applications that include save energy, reduce waste, extend product life, and safeguard the environment. When we first learned of PFAS contamination in 2018, we self-reported to KDEP. We've been working closely and cooperatively with the Commissioner's Office and the characterization and extent of contamination as part of the voluntary agreed order. As Commissioner Hatton clearly stated during his presentation, this includes any remediation steps necessary to address, contain, or remove, and we are committed and determined to achieve these cleanup goals and will keep you all apprised of the status as we move forward. Most important in this investigation is that no exceedance of the federal advisory levels were found in the municipal drinking water levels, including private drinking wells. As I mentioned in the outset, Commissioner Hatton and the KDEP have reported in their findings that there are currently no undue risk to human health and the environment from PFAS contamination. Our aim is to get through this process, and as part of the participation in the Henderson PFAS working group, and be able to assure residents and our employees that Shamrock is a safe place to work, and Henderson is a safe place to raise a family. We continue to evaluate and upgrade our plants and operations and practices to take advantage of improvements in the latest PFAS technology in air monitoring and ventilation. I hope these statements and chronology of events and corrective steps going forward provide a better picture of Shamrock's efforts as a good citizen. These operations are designed to meet all federal, state, and local laws, including cooperation with KDEP on remedial measures where and when appropriate.
Mike, thank you for putting all that together for us. I know when we set out, we had a few goals in mind, and what those were, we really wanted to get a better understanding of where we've been, of where we are, and of where we're going. And I think after the first two meetings and the first part of this meeting, we have a really good understanding of where we were and a pretty good understanding of where we are. One question that I have is, can you describe a little bit more, you kicked off back on, was it Valentine's Day, is that right?
Yes, the current.
Can you describe it a little bit more? Are you able to describe a little bit more about what's going to be going on between now and June?
So currently we're doing the sampling. So we're doing surface soil, and then groundwater sampling right below the surface and then deep. So we'll do that is what we've done through all the other characterization work. So we'll take that data, it'll go off to the labs, it'll be tested. The reports will come back from the labs. It has to be QA to make sure it all makes sense. And then a report will be generated. So between now and then, we'll finish the testing. We'll get the results sent off. Some of the samples are already off. And we'll get all those results back. They'll be reviewed and quality checked. And then from there, a report will be generated and submitted to them.
Okay, and we have plenty, that was the only item on our agenda for today, and we have plenty of time left for questions and comments. Does anybody who is here that is on the panel or here as a guest, do you all have any questions or comments that we can address while we're here today together? Yes, sir.
How far out are we checking the ground and how the determine it's coming from the air?
The initial round of off-site was a half-mile radius from all the facilities. So we focused to the north and northeast from the facilities towards the river. So we'll be going out. It's about a mile. The river's about a mile from at least Community Drive and Industrial Park. So we're out to the river. We're right along the river, actually. On McKinley Street, we're about a mile out. The river's further away from McKinley Street.
Yes, that's on McKinley Street.
We do.
Mike, I think we talked about this before, but are most of your efforts going to be concentrated around remediation, or if there were regulatory limits put in place, you would already be able to meet those through drinking water or through air emissions?
Well, that's kind of a theoretical question, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, if there was limits, to operate, we'd have to meet the limits. So, depending on what those limits are, the answer would be yes. The question is, what are those limits going to be? Right, so that is the big unknown. We are actually going to meet with the state probably in the next, hopefully by the end of March, to start talking about, okay, we've looked at control equipment. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at process modifications. This is what we're looking at and what reductions we can get. We're looking at consolidating. How do we consolidate so we can control it easier and minimize any potential environmental contamination? We're gonna present all those to the state and see if they'll let us start working in that direction. But right now, well, to this part, it's really been easy because we're just collecting data. And the next part is the hard part, because we don't have a hard limit. I mean, you want to emit HF? I know exactly what I can emit, right? 10 tons a year on that's easy. Faster than it. So we don't know. We don't know how air emissions correlate to drinking water contamination. One of our initial meetings back in 2019, Commissioner Hatton talked to Chris Wenzel as the lead for ERM and said, Chris, you need to start thinking about how do you build a model saying if you emit this much out of your stack, it leads to this level in drinking water. But that's a pretty formidable task, because that's a lot of variables. I mean, one of the things we're seeing now, and we're sampling, is some of the wells we're thinking are hard to get water out of because the ground is so flaky, which is good from the perspective that it ties up PFAS. Which is, and again, protected, but but it ties it up also, it's gonna be there, so what do you do with it? At what levels do you have to remediate that? I don't know, I can't answer that question. I mean, we know of technologies that we can use to try to prevent, any contaminated water below our facility from leaving the facility, spending colloidal, carbon and stuff like that, but the question is, what level? How do you measure? And PFAS sampling is challenging in itself. It's a very complicated sampling process. You don't go and just stick a handheld up and get a sample result. I mean, you got to put a train up. You got to, it's like a 7-part train to pull a sample. I don't know if I answered your question. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a pretty big challenge when you talk about the air. You had this tank that you closed. I mean, is that part of your process, or, I mean, it sounds like that was a pretty sizable point source that was identified.
The underground storage tank?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 2014, the management at the time in the region, we had some upsets on the scrubbers. So they decided to put tanks in there to try to collect these upsets, because we had 2 spills that went on the ground. So they put tanks in the ground to try to collect this stuff. There's a lot of things going on. They were unauthorized, they weren't permitted, they were wrong tanks, their integrity failed and caused a concentration. So we knew that was a problem. We yanked those out. We pulled the soil out from around them, and then we'll go back and remediate after the fact once we figure out the full remediation plan for the sites. But so what we did was we actually installed new tanks. They're inside the plant, they're above ground, and they capture all that. Actually, the challenge is to run the scrubbers correctly on.
So you put the waste from the scrubber in the tank.
Yeah, that's what the tanks underground work. Yeah.
One of the things that I mentioned too, again, I'm greatly appreciative of the river report, and we actually have the environmental firm has been doing some work out there doing sampling, and so we have an active agreement to allow that to take place. And we sit right on, obviously we sit right on the river. One of the things that I may mention to the environmentalists, and I don't know how this is going to be applied out, but we all recognize that there is background PFAS in the river. It never came from you guys. It came from God knows where, east of us. It's there all the time. So my question is how, have they indicated to you guys if they thought about how to delineate or, so which way does the water come from? Does it come from the plant to the river, or does it come from the river to the plant? I don't know the answer to that question. If they indicate to you all about how they plan to think about that process.
I mean, that's a very good point, right? PFAS is so ubiquitous throughout the whole world. There may be other sources that we're not aware of. But part of the conceptual site model will be to evaluate other potential sources. But we know there's at least one facility in West Virginia, upstream of us, that had a major issue about 20 years ago.
And Greg, you were, I believe you weren't here for the first meeting, is that right?
I was not, right.
And Tom, I'm gonna ask for your help on this, and actually, I'm gonna ask for you to actually answer what I'm about to try to answer instead of me answering. But in that first meeting, they went over, in pretty extensive detail, what the PFAS levels are in our drinking water, and the fact that they come from upstream and not from Shamrock, and that Shamrock's pathway doesn't jeopardize or impact our drinking water. But can you go over what the parts per million data was from that first meeting?
That is a fingertips problem. Yeah, we've done extensive testing on what's coming in, and all of it would be upstream of us. Even though Shamrock may have air emissions, it doesn't. We're upstream Shamrock. But our levels are about 12 coming in.
From the river?
From the river. And that's conservatively high. I wouldn't even say that's an average. It's on the high end. And we're consistently around 7 to 5 leaving. That's without any kind of treatment. That's just running through the plant. That's without carbon. When we ran carbon, we got non-detect up to about 2 parts per trillion. So it's expensive, but we know we can treat it, remediate it, whatever term you want to call it, if we came down to it. But every limit that we've seen that's below the 70 is hovering around the 10 parts per trillion. You know, most of the communities that are just kind of arbitrarily setting a limit for their own community is hovering around 10. So we're well below that. Yeah, well below that. It doesn't seem like that much when you say the difference from 10 to 7, but that's exponential. Anyway, does that answer your question?
No, it does. And then also to expand on that, Commissioner Hatton gave some examples of other communities that are along the Ohio River. And we're holding right in line with those other communities in terms of parts per million in our drinking water. So not only is it below the standards that are set in communities that are setting them, but we're also very comparable to other communities that are right along the Ohio River as well. Is that accurate? Am I remembering that correctly? What other kinds of questions or comments do we have, or are we good for today?
I do have one thing that Brennan wanted me to ask, and I honestly don't know the context for this, but it could just be a wild rumor that she heard. She texted it to me, so I don't know if it's something that she personally heard or whatever. But the concern was that farmers in our area were getting notices that they could not use their farmland for, what term did she use? Hang on, let me use it. What was her term in the text? Does anybody know the validity of that? Use their land for crops. Does anybody know anything about that?
All I can say as a landowner, I've never seen a notice like that.
Okay.
That's farmland.
I haven't heard of the city putting anything out.
Yeah, I wouldn't know it. And so what I'm wondering about is that that has happened in another state. I'm wondering if that's what she's referring to, because it has happened in Maine. Okay, but it was a different context, because they actually took the waste materials from whatever facility or whatever, and they actually put them on the soil as a way of...
You're probably talking about land farming, the biosolids.
Yeah.
So a lot of farmers will take the sludge material from the wastewater plants, mix it with something, and use it to apply for fertilizer.
Right.
There's nobody around here that does that I know of. It doesn't come from us anyway.
Okay.
100% of our material is landfilled.
Gotcha.
So there wouldn't be unless they trucked it in from somewhere else.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be.
Wouldn't be. So I'm just wondering, wondering, because I haven't heard anything about that either, but she wanted me to ask about that, and I haven't heard anything along those lines. It has happened in other states, and so maybe that's what she's referring to.
I think one of the encouraging things that we've seen throughout this process is that because of the composition of the soil and because of the concentration of where the event occurred and how it flows, that if I'm not mistaken, and we don't have Tony here, Commissioner Hatton here today, but I don't, just listening alongside you all, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that the event is fairly well contained to a certain area and not really, at least based on the sampling that we've seen so far, getting out to where that's a concern that we should be having right now. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know this stuff as well as some of the people in the room, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of the gist of what I've taken from what we've seen so far. Is that accurate? Is that right?
You are correct, because I asked that question specifically from Commissioner Hatton at our last meeting, because he made the comment that what it should do, because of the aquifer underneath our city is really big, and it goes more than just our city or even our county. It's bigger than that. But because of the flow of the river, that the material in the aquifer would actually not move out into the county, it should move toward the river, where it should run. And so there is groundwater contamination, but it's in that aquifer and it's going to move toward the river. That's the thinking. And so that's what he's referring to.
Okay.
He did say that, because I asked him specifically if he was certain about that, and he said yes, he was.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions or comments for that? Yes, sir.
You have a question up on the,
Oh, you did?
yeah. The answer to that is that it goes to
Can you read the question out loud?
Yeah. Once the carbon is used in the water process, where does the waste go? There's still PFAS in the carbon waste, correct? That is correct. It goes straight to the wastewater treatment plant, and from there it goes to the landfill.
Okay.
There is some discharge. We test some of that, but the majority of it is bound up in the biosolids and it's landfill.
Does it go to our landfill, or does it go to a specific?
It goes to, Winslow, Indiana,
It goes to one that's
or Waste Management's what that is now.
And that's a lined landfill?
Yes.
Okay.
We had to do all our thinking on that way, when we talked about increase on cost for the average citizen.
I don't know what it'd break down to the average citizen. Right now, we spend about $60,000 annually on carbon just for routine, treatment. If we needed to meet a regulation for an everyday limit, it would be in the order of, I don't know, probably around $3 to $4 million a year. So whatever percent that is increase, it would result in a rate increase. There's no way we could do that without it. That's before, even, that's even if we could handle it on a 365-day basis. But we haven't stressed the plant or tested the plant to that level. We've done it on a small scale to see if we could mitigate the numbers, and we can. How long we can sustain that, there's no telling. But even with that, I mean, you got that cost of the chemical, but then you got increased costs with biosolids that's even greater than the chemical cost. So, you could be looking in terms of a 12 to 15 million gallons per dollar increase. Big.
I do want to say that I've had the fortune of having a number of very lengthy conversations with Commissioner Hatton over the course of this, and one of them was today. And I'm bringing this up now because you were just now speaking. He had some really good things to say about our water department. He said that he's had a few meetings with you lately, going over the environmental roadmap that the EPA might put out, or what is going to happen, what might happen, and he said he's been nothing but impressed at the level of professionalism and proactiveness from our water department, so I just wanted to pass that along. Sorry, I don't mean to cut out, we still have time. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a question. So, in other words, as a regular course of action, we don't filter all the drinking water through with carbon. Is that what I understood you to say?
That's correct.
Okay, so what does, or how is the decision made to utilize the carbon?
Organic content
Okay,
coming in from the raw water. If
Okay.
the organic content's high, we have target goals that we meet.
okay,
They can only be met by using carbon, because it supports organic material.
right,
So depending on those numbers, we look at them most every day. Sometimes we look at it in just a form of a trend. If that trend starts going up,
then we start
increase.
utilizing.
Yeah.
Okay,
If
so,
there's a spill,
Right.
we hit it.
okay. So then, in other words, increased cost of having to do that on a regular basis. And currently, how often are we testing? I know you guys bumped up testing. You're pulling samples for PFAS like quarterly, okay. So that would involve even just looking at PFAS like on a weekly basis probably at that point, if we
We
had,
don't have to.
right now it's sort of regulated,
Yeah,
right?
we don't have the ability to look at it, on a monthly basis even.
Yeah,
We have to send it out
Right.
to get it tested.
because it has to be a certain lab that you send it to that does that, it has to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably in the next 2 to 5 years, labs like, Moss McGraw here in town, they'll be able to test this stuff. I would assume, this is such a big issue, that testing is gonna be fast-tracked, kind of like the vaccine.
Yes.
They know that it's needing to be seen,
Right.
it's needing to be seen quickly and regularly. Right now, it's out of reach.
Right,
But I don't see it being out of reach for very
Okay.
long.
okay,
Well, again, the ability to test and the accuracy of the testing has changed a lot in the last 2 years, just because there's been a lot of focus on how to test, and it used to be basically that,
One place is good.
yeah, and it's expensive when they do that.
It's still expensive.
Like we've talked about the environmental implications, what is the OSHA stance on this, and what do you guys do to protect your workers from that side?
We have enhanced PPE for dusty applications. We've done industrial hygiene sampling, we're all well within. OSHA hasn't really come out specifically on PFAS. I know they're looking at it. Well, I know the data's been shared with them just because of interactions we've had with EPA and other agencies. But there's not a standalone standard on it.
Are any other questions or comments for today from any of the panelists or any of our guests in the room? All right, so a few things that I picked up, Mike, on your presentation. It sounded like that you have a final plan that's due in June, is that right?
Correct, yes. Like I said, we spoke earlier today, but as far as, keeping everyone up to date, we'd be glad to come back and provide updates for changes, but the next milestone is June.
Okay.
So that may help you with your planning process.
When I spoke with Tony earlier, he said that there's a few things that he would like to update us on, but that still need to be fleshed out. And so that's gonna take a little bit of time, and I think it would probably be appropriate for our next meeting to be after you submitted your plan. So just so that we have, enough to look at and make good use of our time. If there are no objections, I think we're probably looking to get back together close to midsummer. I don't want to in any way give the impression that this doesn't matter to us. And if we need to meet before then, if something else develops that's major, of course, we can always get back together. But I also want to be respectful of your time and the purpose of the group. And so I don't want to lock us into a specific date today, because summer can be tricky, especially with vacation schedules and everything else that we've got going on. But if you would just expect to hear from me as far as our next meeting goes, sometime in June, to plan for about a July meeting, at least a week or two after the July 4th holiday. and I'll get back with you. We'll try to schedule it for a Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, because that seems to be a good time for most of the people in the group as well. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or concerns, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or Donna Stennett, and we can make sure that those get disseminated among the group to have those answered in a more timely fashion. Does anybody else have any comments or questions or anything before we adjourn the meeting today?
One question, if I could, for Donna. Can you tell us how many hits maybe our link on the website gets, and what type of interest the community has on this topic?
I don't have that information, but I can get it from our IT department and send it to you.
I'm just wondering where the community stands on this. Are they feeling like we're providing them information? Is there questions out there that we should be?
You know what, I would only be guessing.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't heard as much from the community as I did when the articles first came out. But, you know, at that time, I was hearing 2 or 3 dozen people a day for a period of a couple of weeks. And now it's not as prevalent as far as what people are reaching out to me with. It doesn't mean that it's any less of a concern, though, so I hesitate to speak on behalf of the community. But I think that I have heard some good feedback about the seriousness that we're taking this issue with, and us being proactive. And I've heard some really good feedback from the state, because the environmental roadmap, the EPA roadmap seems to be like it's going to be a big deal, and not just for Henderson, but for communities everywhere across the United States. And so what this has done is brought this attention farther into the light for us. I have a feeling the water department would have been looking at it anyway, but where we stand now, we're so far ahead of other communities in terms of looking at it and preparing for what might be happening down the road with this EPA roadmap. So that it is a positive that is coming out of it. And I think the best thing that we can do is just stay connected, make the best use of our time, and keep a good proactive stance going forward. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to piggyback off that comment. So I've been working with Ms. Dowdy. I'm from the University of Louisville at the Center for Integrative Environmental Health Sciences. We have a community engagement force, so our whole purpose is to help translate science and try to make it very practical when you have these kind of exposures. So as you move into that and you understand what your community concerns are, that's our whole purpose, to kind of put it in layman's terms and share the knowledge. I agree with the gentleman that PFAS is pretty prevalent in our McDonald's wrappers and our water-resistant jackets. But when you have a release that's so concentrated in one community, your concerns about risk do go up. So it will be important just to keep your pulse on the issue and make sure that those things stand as time moves forward.
Absolutely.
So we're here to help with that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you for both our other guests for coming and showing interest and asking questions. If there's nothing else, then I think we can consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.